The Chippewa Valley line that he talks about, White Pine Line, to me is not a lumber railroad. It started at Wabasha, Minnesota. I'll show you some pictures of that. Coming up, followed the Chippewa River, came up to Eau Claire, and actually went to Chippewa Falls. So it was supposed to go all the way to Lake Superior and never got north of Chippewa Falls. So it hauled a lot of, and there's a branch line in Menomonie from just north of Duran. And so it hauled a lot of lumber, but I don't think they ever really hauled any logs. It never reached into the pineries. Now you'll see some pictures that I did accumulate. I'm doing my next book on the Omaha Railroad, and one of the branches went from Tuscobia, north of Rice Lake, up to Park Falls, through Birchwood. That did a lot of logging. I'm doing a book on the Cornell line that ran from Chippewa Falls out through Cornell. A lot of logging there, where they actually hauled logs to the lumber mill. So, but this is one of those pictures. Is it slightly out of focus? One of the problems of doing these books on local abandoned railroads, they went out a long time ago. And as you know, the White Pinery ended around 1900. Well, how many people had cameras before 1900 out taking pictures, and you couldn't afford it, they didn't have one, and of course if there were any pictures, a lot of them got lost and so on. So whenever you come up with a picture, you're usually pretty happy to get it. And this, when I saw this one, I said, oh my gosh. This is right here in Menomonie, and it's the Knapp Stout Mill. And John Russell is not here, and apparently he was going to be here. John Russell is the historian of the Menomonie area. And fortunately, he's given a lot to the Dunn County Historical Society. I got some from John personally, and I got a few more from here. And so this would be about where Highway 25 is right now, the bridge right over there. And the Milwaukee Road that I researched followed right along here and went up here. And here was their first depot. Now, when NSP built a dam here, this is all flooded in here now. So that is part of Lake Menomonie, and the Menomonie Public Library would be over in this area. So behind the Menomonie Public Library would be this big Lake Menomonie. But it's just a really good shot from probably, what, the late 1800s? And I think this is the company store. The next picture will show that. And there is another shot of the replaced bridge. Now you can see the company store here. And it's about the same thing, but they've added a lot of stuff here. They got the Tanner gates in here? I think so. You're going to hear about that tonight and so on. That is the Tanner gate right there. So, just a priceless shot. Now, the Milwaukee Road ran up here. Right down through here was the Omaha Railway. In fact, right there, they're pile driving timbers in there for that bridge. And that line was just made into a trail completely up through there a few years ago. So I'm trying to do some of Menomonie. This is from 1935, so here is where Knapp Stout would have been located here. Now you see the dam here, here's Lake Menomonie. The Omaha Railroad came in here and went down, and this now is Santa Dairies. It's had a lot of different names. I think it's Santa, making pudding and stuff. Milwaukee Road went underneath it. This bridge is still there. It's a steel bridge now, and so you have a little idea where we are. I think I'd like to point out this. Anybody know what that is in these big cities? That is the gas plant where they made coal gas, which they use for their lights. They pipe it around town. That's how you had your electric lights in the old days. This is from the Chippewa Valley Museum, and this is probably the 1905 flood. Anytime you're along rivers, you have flooding. Fortunately, you had them to take the logs down to the mills and stuff like that. But when 1905 hit, I think that was probably, this had Milwaukee Road track, and it was never obviously built back there again. But it was right about the time of the ending of the logging era anyway. So they probably built Highway 25 across there, and they just never rebuilt that. This is the probably 1905 destructive force of floods, as you know. So if I go too fast, this is a close-up. I thought it was really neat of that Milwaukee Road depot that was down there. So that picture I just tried to blow up and get down in there. This track then continued along the Red Cedar River up to Cedar Falls. Cedar Falls had a big mill that was served by the Omaha, and then in Milwaukee wanted some of the profits for hauling the lumber, so they built a line up there also and hauled out lumber. This is the depot in Menomonie here that everybody thinks about. It's still in existence. It's the headquarters of the Red Cedar Bike Trail down there now. And the trees are so built up around here and stuff, it doesn't already look the same. But there was quite a lot of industry down here. Here's some tractors or combines or something are hauled in, of course, the oil industry. I don't have a lot of logging pictures, but one of the things that intrigues me is some Menomonie brickyards. So right down in here would be that depot that I just showed you, and there's a lot of clay around here. Don and Frank can tell a lot more, but they used to make a lot of bricks here that were shipped all over the country, streets of Minneapolis and stuff like that. And so a lot of bricks were shipped out. I think Dan Hansen wrote a nice article on this for the Milwaukee Road magazine. Was there 5 or 7 brickyards at one time? It must be kind of interesting hauling out bricks. You know how heavy bricks are? You put in these old wood boxcars. A little interesting tidbit down here. These are turnbuckles. So when the floor started sagging, you'd crank up that turnbuckle and straighten out the floor again until they started making steel cars. This is down at Dunnville. And Dunnville is along the Red Cedar River, just about where the Red Cedar dumps into the Chippewa River. And they would float the lumber down on these rafts down to Dunnville, tie, like 3 of these together to go down the Chippewa River. And then when they got down to Reed's Landing, they'd tie a bunch more together to go on the Mississippi River. So they had great big rafts. I like this picture. Here is one of those lumber rafts. It's a little out of focus here and stuff like this. This is at Irvington, just south of Menomonie. There's a big box factory here called the Coffin, C-O-F-F-I-N. It's the name of the company. They didn't make coffins there. They made like fruit baskets and stuff like that. So they're switching out a car here and taking lumber down here, I guess, to make the baskets and stuff like that. They used to load, in box cars, it's hard to load long sticks of lumber. You load them through the end. You have to take them out through the end because you couldn't go through the door. Door's in the middle, and your lumber is longer than that lengthwise. So it would really be trouble getting that out of there. But this is probably my all-time favorite picture. Here they're shipping down mostly laths here. Here's some shingles. And these 2 guys are just moseying along the Red Cedar River, taking their raft down. And here comes a whole trainload of lumber, lath, shingles, probably whatever, zipping down the track. Let's just say they're headed to St. Louis. This train will be in St. Louis in what, a couple of days? And all the wood's protected and everything else. How long do you think it'll be before that gets to St. Louis? You know, as soon as the railroad came in, essentially, well, no more steamboats. Steamboats quit essentially the day the railroad was built. The steamboats used to come up the Chippewa River to Eau Claire a lot. They actually went to Chippewa Falls, but had trouble because the river was so shallow. And they probably came up to Menomonie. I don't know if they ever really, small ones might have come to Menomonie. I guess they had to have. But that's an end of an era, I guess. This is the railroad that I did the last book on. And this is Reed's Landing, up on the hill at Reed's Landing. This railroad started down at Wabasha, went across the Mississippi River, followed the Chippewa River up here to Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls with a branch line in Menomonie. When it was first built, to get across the Mississippi, it's almost a mile wide across there. Look at the trestle they built. But of course, it's a lot of upkeep, so they filled in part of it. Now, they can't fill in the whole thing. You've got to have a river flow. But if you build a trestle across there, there are steamboats that want to go through there. There are rafts that want to go through there. There are also logs. So this is what they call the pontoon. It's 396 feet long. Let's call it 400 feet. I call it an ark, like Noah's Ark. It's hinged on one end. And when they wanted to open it up, they let the river essentially flow it open. Then they had a steamboat over here that would push it back shut so the trains could go over it again. This is a nice shot. We'll just do this. Wabasha has got an old school here, which is the Wabasha County Historical Society. They have a great little museum down there, and a building behind a lot of artifacts. Nice people, nice place. If you ever get a chance to go down there, you may want to. Here is a boat going across the Mississippi River. And of course, a lot of these old pictures, you don't have the year on them, but the Mississippi River is so low, they're standing out in the middle of the Mississippi River here taking this picture. Couple of little things if you got train nuts in here like me. This is called a mixed train. It's got freight and passengers. There were some passenger-only trains going, but you couldn't afford to run that. So they put a coach at the back end and haul them at the same time. Even at this time, 1900, they had what I call the billboard boxcars, where the companies would paint their insignia, their name on them and stuff like that. It's pretty neat. If it was a creamery, you know, they'd have it on there or something. But the most intriguing part is this right here. This is before 1900 because there are no air brakes on these cars. And the way to slow the train down, the engine could not stop a big train going. You'd have brakemen up here, and they'd run from car to car to car and turn down the brake wheel to put the brakes on each car. To say it was dangerous would be an understatement. You know, besides falling off, getting rolled over by the train, can you imagine in the winter time how icy, snowy, wind hit you and throw you off? And if you're out in the mountains out west, can you imagine coming down? So in 1900, it was mandated by 1900, they must have air brakes on all the cars. It took a few years to get it implemented. But air brakes mean there's an air line through all, then the engineer up here can throw a lever and put on brakes on all the cars to slow it down. So that made it a lot safer. Plus, they used to have couplers that were called link and pin. They had a round link, and a couple of cars, you had between the cars, you'd have to put pins in. They're a metal bar like that. So you'd stand in there and put those in there to a couple of cars. A lot of guys were called lefty or righty or something like that, or three fingers or something. And so they made knuckle couplers. So it's a lot safer nowadays. And this is a neat shot too, probably about the same time, but look how low the river is. And now the pontoon is open, and here's a steamboat coming through. It's kind of a neat shot.
What were they firing the engines then?
The pontoon boat, or the pontoon here, there were only 4 of them for the railroads. 2 of them were down at Prairie du Chien, Marquette, going across the Mississippi down there, and 1 was in Chamberlain, South Dakota. And I actually researched this. This book, I don't know, took me 10 years to put together. But I think I have 13 pages on this pontoon, including drawings and stuff like that. I think I probably have more than anybody else in the country. I'm kind of proud of that. Okay, I'm jumping to Chippewa Falls now. This is the Milwaukee Road, was shared by the Sioux Line. Main part of Chippewa Falls is right here. We're looking north. The reason I put this one in here, this is the Weyerhaeuser Mill at Chippewa Falls. And it was called the Big Mill, and it was the largest lumber mill under one roof in the world. So it was gigantic. And of course, the railroad shipped out a lot of lumber. It's a lot of lumber history in Chippewa Falls there too. And this is just a slightly later shot. They improved. This is the Milwaukee Road Rail Yard, but there is a Big Mill. So there's a lot of history there too. And of course, it burned down too. I threw this one in there. Tiffany Bottoms is right down here. One of the first pictures I got, Doug Hurlbert lives down that area, and he gave me that picture. I thought, oh wow, is that neat? So they were logging down in those bottoms there. Yeah, look how huge that is. And a lot of times, as I understand it, when you see these big pictures of these logs drawn by horses, oxen, they're staged for effect. They didn't really make them that big. If they were that big, they would, and coming down a hill, they'd wipe out the.
I often wondered that.
So,
Pretty high.
that's pretty high, but it's, yeah, not a rail car. They're not going through any tunnels, and You know, where is it going? It's probably just going down to a mill at Reed's Landing, or what's that big one just south of Reed's Landing they had on the, I can't think right now. Could it be going up to Menomonie? I don't know that they took logs up to Knapp Stout, but I guess they could have. And I don't know, but loading it, look at here. They got these wood sticks for stakes, so I guess what you do, you put horses on the other side, tie a log, and you pull it up there, trying to keep it straight so it isn't tipping, you know. Yeah. Gene Stroot's dad was one of the engineers on this line, and Gene worked the line too. And he gave me this picture. I thought it was neat. I don't know which mill it is. It's in one of the Eau Claire sawmills. Nothing on the picture, you know, date and stuff like that. But here is a lumber mill, and they're hauling out lumber. And this shot is at Eau Claire. This is the pulp and paper company right over here. So we're looking north. This railroad bridge is the original Omaha Railroad bridge that came in. There's a new one right behind it over here. And the Omaha went down to Shawtown, down through here by Luther Hospital. And this is right on the banks of the Chippewa River. And as I'm guessing right here, it's right by Half Moon Lake. These log cars come in here, and I think they roll the logs out into the Chippewa River, down into Half Moon Lake, the Shaw Mill, what are some of those other? Kaiser Mill was a big one there. Sherman Mill. So I think that's probably where they're heading. That's how they unloaded them. One of the things that really interests me, you know anything about McGifford loaders? That's a way of loading the logs onto rail cars. Now, I stole a lot of these off the internet. I know the guy at Rib Lake, but I took them off the internet here. And what they do, they pull the log car underneath, then they could load on it and then pull the car back out with that big loader. So they're really pretty neat. And this could go right on the rail itself to the next place. And there's another one of it, and another one of it, and another one of it. Up at Duluth, the Lake Superior Railroad Museum has got one on display. And you can walk right up in there. I was up in there, last week and got the pictures. And it's pretty neat. It's all fully restored. And they simulate a log car right here. And there's the history of it. And there's the inside of it. Log loading. We talked a little bit. You got a jib crane here. And there's one way. So this thing, I guess, you'd pick one up and then swing that over and drop it down on the car. Again, I think they're sitting up there for effect. I don't think they normally rolled it up onto the car. It'd be a little dangerous. And more log loading. Log trains, this is Hannibal. Hannibal is east of Cornell. Taylor County, right. This is up at Coudray. Log mill. These are sawdust burners, these big silos. One reason I do this, if you ever know where I can get more pictures from my books, I'd appreciate doing that. Brunette River up on the Tuscobia line. And these railroads were not built to the specifications for today. And you could have problems. I don't know how fast they were going, but that's a pretty good wreck. I wouldn't think they would have gone fast enough to cause something, but you get a lot of weight on the train, you know, and it keeps on going. It doesn't just stop on a dime. This is called the Phoenix Log Hauler. It was made right in Eau Claire, down at Phoenix Park. Phoenix Park was a big Milwaukee Road yard, and they had this big manufacturing place where they built steam engines that would run out in the woods to haul the logs. And there were tracks, obviously. And what's kind of interesting, they steered them by skis, and the guy sat right here. There's the steering wheel. There's one ready to go out from Phoenix Park. And there they're posing. You can see right there. I don't know. They ice these trails, as you know, but still, trying to turn a snowmobile is sometimes hard. Can you imagine trying to turn that baby? So, Charlie Schaff at Eau Claire is trying to get a Phoenix log hauler for the park down there. There are some around the world. There's one over at Wabeno that runs in the summer I have never seen it actually operated to do it on grass. and steer it and stuff like that. That'd be fun to watch. Berkshire, Wisconsin, logs. This is the logging or a lumber mill at Birchwood, which is still in existence. They make veneer now. Heinz Lumber Company, we all hear of Knapp, Stout, and Weyerhaeuser. Heinz Lumber Company was a pretty big one. They had a lumber mill in Park Falls, and they bought the one in Rice Lake and took over. So they brought a lot. Loretta is one of the little towns up on the Tuscobia line to Park Falls. At Winter. What's a hot pond? One that didn't thaw in the winter? It's just amazing, all these little towns up on there, how much lumber they shipped out, or logs I should say, you know. Every little town had their loading spot, their siding, and took them to the mills. These are from Rib Lake. That's a water tank for icing the trail so the sleds would go better. Some of those are actually colorized by hand, you know, the postcards. They're not maybe a color picture from that day. They did a lot of that in the old days. That's the Rib Lake Mill. I don't know if you can read a story about a lumber mill that did not burn down at one time. Can you just imagine all the dry wood, sawdust, and everything else? And I don't know, the guys smoke in those days like they did back in the, let's say, 40s and stuff, if everybody was smoking, you know, and stuff, or a spark from a saw or something. And the fire control was not quite like it is now, I'm sure, you know, and once it starts, how do you stop it? Here's the inside of a saw. A lot of times you don't see the inside of one. Here's the inside of a log mill. Look at, here's a railroad. I had to put that in there. Flimsily laid a bunch of wood down and tack the rails right onto the wood. You don't even use the plates like we use nowadays. So they lived in these places like this. Lining up for chow. Can you imagine serving that many hungry guys coming in the morning and have all the flapjacks or whatever, eggs and stuff? And they slept on what, straw mattresses? Can you imagine how infested those things would be? How dirty? Shay locomotives are special geared locomotives that had a lot more pulling power. This summer I went out to Cass, West Virginia, riding a lot of trains. But they have these awesome steam engines that were lumber railroads. Now they're tourist railroad up there. They're going up these gigantic, it's up to 12% grade, there are 10% grades. And it's really fun. If you like riding trains, you might want to go out there sometime.